The Galactic Academy was never quiet. It was a place where hundreds of young minds from dozens of planets came to learn, compete, and survive. Every day the halls echoed with alien languages, laughter, and the sound of footsteps from claws, hooves, and boots alike. The Academy cafeteria was the noisiest place of all, a bright, metallic hall filled with strange smells and louder voices. At one of the long metal tables, Cadet Mira Evans, one of the very few humans at the Academy, sat quietly. Her dark hair was tied back, and her uniform was plain compared to the colorful and armored suits of the other species. Mira was small by alien standards, and most students barely noticed her. Unless they wanted to make a joke about humans being fragile, she didn't mind. She was used to it. Every lunch break she sat in the same spot, a corner table near the wall, where she could watch the room without being seen. Her food was simple too, some protein cubes, steamed vegetables, and a drink that at least resembled coffee. She had learned to eat alone without feeling lonely. But that day, something was different. The sound of a tray clattering to the floor made several heads turn. From the far end of the room, a group of students from the Velrax species, tall feline predators with fur patterns like tigers and eyes that glowed faintly yellow, stood up suddenly. They hissed and shouted in their language, their tails flicking with anger. Something small darted between their legs and one of them snarled. Mira squinted. The thing running was not a student, it was too small. It was a cub. A Velrax cub, barely half a meter tall, its fur ruffled, eyes wide, clutching something close to its chest. Maybe food, or maybe just fear. No one moved. No one ever interfered when Velrax were angry. Their kind were known for their pride and their short temper. Even as children, they were strong enough to break a human's arm with one swipe. The cub ran under a table and tried to hide. The older Velrax students shouted again, their claws flexing. "Thief!" One of them roared in accented Galactic common. "It took from our table." The cafeteria went silent. All around, students turned away, pretending not to see. The last thing anyone wanted was to get involved in a predator's family problem, but Mira couldn't. Look away. The cub crawled out from under one table and slipped beneath another and then another until it ended up under her table. She felt it brush against her boots and freeze. She looked down. Two glowing eyes stared up at her from the shadows. The cub trembled, her heart began to race. It was terrified. And hungry, Mira slowly lowered her hand, palm open. "Hey, it's okay," she whispered softly, though she doubted the cub could understand human words. The cub sniffed the air, its small fangs showing as it let out a tiny growl, not of threat but confusion. A heavy voice echoed across the room. "Human." She looked up. The tallest of the Velrax students, probably a senior cadet, was glaring directly at her. His fur bristled, his armor catching the light. "Move aside. That is not your concern," Mira swallowed. Every instinct told her to stay quiet, to step back like everyone else. But she saw the cub's thin arms, the dirt on its fur, and the way it tried to hide behind her legs. She sighed. "It looks scared," she said softly. The Velrax leader bared his fangs. "It dishonored our pack by stealing. Fear is its punishment." Mira's eyes moved to her tray. She still had half her lunch untouched. Without thinking twice, she picked up her plate and gently slid it to the edge of the table, setting it on the floor. The cub sniffed the food, looked up at her, and hesitated. "Go on," she whispered, smiling just a little. "You're hungry, right?" The cub leaned forward, took one cautious bite, then another, and in seconds was eating as if it hadn't seen food in days. Its small claws clicked against the metal plate as it devoured every crumb. The silence in the cafeteria was deafening. No one spoke. Every alien eye was fixed on the small act unfolding before them. One of the Velrax soldiers let out a low growl, ready to step forward, but the leader raised a hand to stop him. He watched Mira instead. When the cub finally finished, it sat up straight, looked at her again, and made a small sound, almost like a purr. Then it slipped away, darting between tables and disappearing through the door. Mira slowly picked up her empty tray. Her heart was still beating fast. No one clapped. No one said a word. But the whispers started before she even left the hall. She fed it. "Did you see that? A human feeding a Velrax cub? She's insane. Or brave." As Mira walked toward the exit, she could feel every gaze on her back. Some were curious, others full of quiet respect, but most were filled with fear. She didn't know what she had just done, or what it would mean. All she knew was that a small, frightened creature had needed help, and she couldn't just sit and watch. Outside the cafeteria, the hall was cooler and quieter. Mira leaned against the wall, closing her eyes for a moment. She thought the moment was over. But deep within the shadows of the hallway, a pair of golden eyes blinked, watching her. The Velrax leader stood still, his expression unreadable. Then very slowly, He spoke to the others beside him in his native tongue. "Remember her face," he said quietly, "the human who fed the cub." And with that they turned and left. Mira didn't know it yet, but her small act of kindness had just changed everything. The next morning the Galactic Academy felt different. Whispers floated through the hallways like dust in sunlight. Everywhere Mira went, conversation stopped the moment she passed. Some students stared. Others turned away, pretending to check their data pads. Mira wasn't used to attention, especially not this kind. When she reached her class, the holoboard was already alive with moving symbols. Her alien instructor, a tall insectoid scholar from Threx Prime, greeted her with a faint nod. But even his antennae twitched with curiosity as she took her seat. Two human cadets at the back, the only other ones in the academy, leaned toward each other and whispered, not quite softly enough. "She's the one who fed it," one said. "Yeah, the predator cub. They say she risked her life." Mira sighed. She wasn't trying to be brave. She had just given food to someone who was hungry. That was all. But at the Galactic Academy, nothing was just simple. By midday, the story had twisted in 100 directions. Some said the cub had been violent and Mira had tamed it. Others claimed the cub had bitten her, and she'd stared it down without flinching. A few even said she was some kind of animal empath. The truth didn't matter anymore. The story had taken on a life of its own. When she entered the cafeteria again that afternoon, the energy in the room changed instantly. Students at the nearby tables went quiet. Some watched her with fascination, others with suspicion. Mira walked toward her usual spot, the same corner table, the same plain tray, but something was different this time. The seat she always took was empty, untouched. No one else dared to sit there. She sat down slowly. The moment she lifted her fork, she noticed a few alien cadets whispering across the room. A group of Velreks, older, larger, wearing academy combat uniforms, sat together on the far side. Their golden eyes flicked toward her, sharp and calculating. They weren't smiling. Mira forced herself to eat, pretending she didn't notice. Her pulse, however, told another story. Halfway through lunch, she heard it again. The word human whispered like it was something fragile. Two Drixen students, scaled and reptilian, hissed softly. "She shouldn't have done it." "It's a predator's cub," one said. "It was exiled for theft. Feeding it was interference." Mira clenched her jaw. She wasn't trying to interfere. The cub had looked starving. How could anyone just sit and watch? Still, she knew she couldn't explain that to everyone. So she stayed silent. But silence didn't stop rumors. It only fed them. By evening, the story had spread far beyond her dorm sector. On the Academy's internal network, hollow threads with her name flashed across message boards. Human feeds predator cub. Why? New alliance forming between Velraks and humans? Possible violation of Pack Honor Code. Some of the comments were supportive. Most were not. Humans were still new to the Galactic Alliance, seen as unpredictable, emotional, impulsive, reckless. To many alien races, that made them dangerous. And now Mira had become a perfect example. Later that night, she sat alone by the wide observation window in the dorm's common area. Outside, the planet below shimmered blue and green, the Academy floating above it like a silent city of light. She could hear the faint hum of starships docking at the far hangar. The stars looked calm. A strange comfort when the entire station seemed to be whispering her name. Footsteps echoed behind her. She turned to see her roommate, Tira, a lean avian cadet with soft silver feathers and sharp amber eyes. "You've made quite the story," Tira said lightly, perching on the edge of the couch. "Half the school is talking about you." "I didn't mean to," Mira replied. "It was just a hungry cub." Tira tilted her head. "You don't understand Velrak's culture. Feeding one of their young, especially one being punished, it's complicated. They believe strength comes from struggle. Helping the weak is seen as dishonor." Mira frowned. "That's awful." "Maybe, but it's how they live. And now you've changed something they take very seriously." Mira looked out the window again, thinking of the cub's frightened eyes. "I don't regret it," she said quietly. "I know," Tira replied softly. "That's why they're watching you." The next morning, the whispers turned into stares. When Mira entered her tactical class, she noticed 3 Velraks cadets sitting in the back. Their eyes followed her movements like a hunter tracking prey. They didn't speak, but their presence was enough to make everyone else uneasy. By lunch, the tension reached a point where the cafeteria doors hissed open, and even the background chatter died. The same 4 Velraks who had been angry days ago now stood at the entrance. They weren't wearing training armor this time. They wore full ceremonial gear, gleaming silver with red insignias across their chests. Their leader, the tall one with striped fur and a cold stare, scanned the room. When his eyes found Mira, he didn't hesitate. He walked toward her table. The others followed. The sound of their metal boots echoed with every step. Mira froze. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat. The entire cafeteria watched, holding its breath. The Velrax leader stopped right in front of her. For a long, tense moment, no one said a word. Then, in a deep voice, he spoke. "You fed one of ours." Mira nodded slowly. "Yes, it was hungry." The Velrax tilted his head slightly. His expression was unreadable. "That cub belonged to my bloodline," he said quietly. "You showed it mercy when none of us would." A ripple of gasps moved through the crowd. Mira opened her mouth, but he raised a clawed hand, not in threat, but in silence. "You have done something our kind has not seen in generations," he continued. "You have reminded us of compassion." He turned, and with a motion of his hand, the other Velrax bowed. To her. Then, without another word, they walked away. For several seconds, no one moved. Then the entire cafeteria broke into hushed chatter. "She's under their protection," someone whispered. "No one touches her now," said another. Mira just sat there, stunned, unsure if what just happened was real. She didn't feel like a hero, just confused. But deep down, a small part of her knew the truth. The simple act of sharing a meal had just begun something far greater than she could imagine. And as the cafeteria returned to its usual chaos, the word spread across the academy's halls like fire. The human who fed the cub, now guarded by the predators themselves. The next morning dawned quiet, too quiet for the Galactic Academy. Usually the corridors hummed with chatter and footsteps from hundreds of species heading to their classes. But this time, wherever Cadet Mira Evans went, silence seemed to follow her. She could feel it, the weight of eyes on her back. Some curious, some fearful, some respectful. Mira didn't like attention. She had always preferred blending in. But after what happened in the cafeteria yesterday, after the Velrax soldiers bowed to her, there was no blending in anymore. When she entered her first class, every head turned. The instructor, a thin aquatic being with transparent skin, paused mid-lecture. His gills fluttered once in surprise, then he resumed teaching, though his eyes kept glancing toward her corner seat. Even her datapad notifications buzzed non-stop. Messages 54 unread. Most were from strangers. Some wanted to praise her. Others wanted to insult her. One message simply read, "You have no idea what you've done, human." She closed the device and took a deep breath. She didn't want fame. She wanted to study, graduate, and return to Earth someday. But now that dream felt distant, buried beneath layers of whispers, politics, and fear. By the afternoon, things got worse. When she walked into the cafeteria, the usual sound of voices fell silent again. This time it wasn't just stares. Every table around hers was empty. Someone had cleared the space, no trays, no students, no noise. At the far end of the hall, a pair of academy guards stood near the door, unusual since they never patrolled during lunch. Mira stopped, her tray shaking slightly in her hands. "What's going on?" she murmured. Her friend Tira, the avian cadet with silver feathers, appeared behind her. "You haven't heard?" Mira frowned. "Heard what?" Tira lowered her voice. "The Velrax are coming." Mira blinked. "Coming here? For what?" Tira gave her a look that mixed awe and worry. "For you." Before Mira could ask another question, the doors at the far end slid open with a heavy hiss. 4 figures entered, tall, broad-shouldered, their armor shining under the cafeteria lights. The Velrax soldiers moved with slow, deliberate precision. Their claws tapped softly against the metal floor. Behind them, students stood from their seats, whispering in fear. The tallest one led the group, the same Velrax who had spoken to her yesterday. His fur was streaked with dark stripes, and his eyes glowed faintly gold. Without hesitation, they walked straight toward her. The sound of their boots echoed across the cafeteria. No one dared to speak. Even the academy guards didn't move. Mira's mouth went dry. Her heart pounded so loud she could almost hear it. Tira stepped back, feathers bristling nervously. "Be careful," she whispered. The Velrax stopped in front of Mira's table. For a long moment the room was silent, so silent that even the hum of the air vents sounded loud. Then the leader spoke. "Cadet Mira Evans," he said in a deep, rumbling voice. "Daughter of Earth, you are requested to come with us." Mira blinked. "Why?" "Because our commander wishes to speak to you." Her first thought was, this is it. I'm in trouble. But his tone wasn't threatening. It was respectful, almost formal. Still she hesitated. I have class." "You will be excused," the Velrax said simply. The way he said it left no room for argument. Tira touched Mira's arm. "Go," she whispered. "Just come back alive, okay?" Mira gave her a nervous half-smile. and followed the Velrax soldiers. They led her through the long metal corridors of the academy, past curious students and silent guards, climbed to a restricted area she had never entered before. The lights here were dimmer, the air colder. Finally, they stopped in front of a large door marked with the Velrax crest, a stylized claw wrapped around a star. The leader tapped the door panel and it slid open with a hiss. Inside was a meeting room, dark, quiet, lined with glowing symbols along the walls. At the center stood a massive figure, Commander Thalvarn, head of the Velrax detachment at the academy. He was enormous, easily twice Mira's height, his armor carved with intricate markings of rank and honor. His eyes burned with the calm intensity of a predator who never needed to raise his voice to be feared. The soldiers stepped aside. Mira stood alone before him. "Human," the commander said, his tone slow and measured. "You are the one who fed our cub." Mira swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. I didn't mean to offend anyone. The little one was hungry and—" Thalvarn raised a clawed hand gently. "You have not offended us." That surprised her. "I haven't?" The commander's gaze softened almost imperceptibly. "No, you have done something we did not think possible. You showed mercy. To one of our young." Mira frowned. "But isn't that normal?" "Not for us," Thalvarn said quietly. "Among the Velrax, weakness is punished. Compassion is seen as weakness. But your act, and witnessed by many higher, has challenged that belief. The cub you fed is the child of our prime general." Mira's eyes widened. "What?" The commander nodded slowly. "You fed the offspring of our leader, one of the most powerful beings in the Velrax dominion. Word of your action has already reached our homeworld." Mira took a step back, stunned. "I didn't know. I just saw someone hungry." "And that," Thalvarn interrupted, "is why it matters." He stepped closer, his huge shadow falling across her. "You acted without fear, without strategy, without demand for reward. Such behavior is foreign to us, but it has made us reconsider what strength truly means." Mira didn't know what to say. She felt small, lost in the presence of beings who saw her as both curiosity and symbol. Finally, Thalvarn spoke again. "From this day you are under the protection of the Velrax pack at this academy. None shall harm you or speak against you. Your kindness has earned our honor." Mira blinked. "I don't need protection." He tilted his head. "That is not for you to decide." There was no arrogance in his voice, only sincerity. He turned toward the soldiers. "Ensure her safety, always." They bowed and motioned for Mira to follow them out. As she walked back through the corridors, the silence was heavier than ever. When she returned to the cafeteria, students parted like water, giving her space. Tira rushed forward. "Are you okay? What happened?" Mira sat down slowly, her voice quiet but steady. "They said, I'm under their protection." Tira's eyes widened. "Their what?" Mira looked at her untouched meal, then at the crowd staring from a distance. She sighed. "I don't understand it either." But deep inside, something told her this was only the beginning. That one small act of kindness had opened a door to something far bigger than friendship. And as the Velrax soldiers silently took positions around the cafeteria, watching over her like shadows, the academy realized something terrifying and awe-inspiring at once. The predators had chosen a human as one of their own. The news broke faster than light. By the next morning, everyone at the Galactic Academy, from first-year cadets to senior officers, knew one fact. The Velrax pack had placed a human under their protection. In a place where peace between species was built on delicate treaties, this was more than gossip. It was political shock. Hollow screens in the Academy Commons flickered with discussion threads. Students argued across tables, instructors whispered in corners, and even the headmaster's office had been flooded with messages from the Galactic Council. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a disaster waiting to happen, and in the middle of it all sat Cadet Mira Evans, a young human who just wanted to eat lunch in peace. When she entered the cafeteria that morning, the whispers returned, louder than ever. "Is that her?" "Yes, the human who fed the predator cub." They say the Velrax leader bowed to her. No one bows in their culture. No one. Mira pretended not to hear, clutching her tray and trying to breathe normally. But when she reached her usual table, she froze. Her seat, the one she always used, was no longer empty. Instead, it was surrounded. 4 Velrax soldiers stood there, their armor gleaming silver blue, visors reflecting the light. They stood like statues, scanning the crowd. When Mira approached, the nearest one stepped aside and gestured politely. "Cadet Evans," he said, voice deep and calm. "Your place awaits." The entire cafeteria went silent. Mira swallowed. "I can sit anywhere, really." "It is the order of Commander Thalvarn," the soldier interrupted gently. "You sit here. We watch." She sighed, realizing there was no way to refuse without causing offense. All right. Thank you. She sat down slowly, feeling hundreds of eyes on her. The Velrax stood behind her table, unmoving. Their shadows stretched across the floor like dark wings. On the other side of the cafeteria, Dean Solenvar, the head of the academy, was watching from the observation deck above. His smooth blue skin glistened under the light as he rubbed his temples. This is going to cause trouble, he muttered. Beside him stood Ambassador Kieran, the human representative to the academy. Or maybe Hope, she said quietly. You've seen the feeds. Every species is talking about it. A human act of kindness that changed Velrax honor traditions. That's history, Solon turned, his eyes sharp. Or it's a spark that could ignite tension. The Velrax are warriors, not diplomats. Their idea of gratitude can look like domination. Kieran sighed. Still, it's genuine. They respect her. That's not something to fear. Tell that to the parents of my students, Solon said. Half the academy believes we've let a predator faction claim ownership of a human cadet. Kieran's lips pressed into a thin line. Then maybe it's time for everyone to learn what humans are really like. Back on the cafeteria floor, Mira just wanted to eat without shaking. Every time she lifted her fork, the metal clink echoed too loudly. Around her, alien cadets whispered in at least a dozen languages. Some took photos. Some looked away. Across the hall, a group of reptilian Drixan cadets sneered. See? The predators keep their pet close, one hissed. Another replied, she's lucky or stupid. Probably both. Mira tried to ignore them. She looked up at the Velrax soldier nearest her. His name tag read Ren Vac. You don't have to stand all day, she said softly. Really, I'm fine. Ren Vac's golden eyes flickered with something almost like amusement. Protection is honor. You gave food. We give loyalty. Equal trade, she smiled faintly. That doesn't sound equal. He tilted his head. To us it is. By the afternoon, the story reached the top levels of the academy hierarchy. Mira was summoned to the dean's office, a circular room with glass walls overlooking the starfield. When she entered, she saw Dean Solenvar, Ambassador Kieran, and to her surprise, Commander Thalvarn himself. The atmosphere was tense. Mira Evans, Solon began, folding his four-fingered hands. Do you understand the impact of your actions? She hesitated. I fed a hungry cub. Ambassador Kieran smiled slightly as if proud of the simplicity, but the dean's expression darkened. That cub, he said, belongs to one of the most powerful families in Velrax culture. Your action has changed things. Thalvarn spoke next, his deep voice vibrating the air. Change for the better, Solon frowned. Or for chaos. Commander, with respect, your soldiers have disrupted order. Students are afraid. Afraid of kindness? Thalvarn countered quietly. Perhaps your academy should question why compassion causes fear. The dean opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. He couldn't find an answer. Mira spoke softly. I didn't want all this. I just couldn't ignore it. The cub looked scared. Thalvarn looked at her with a strange respect. And that is why your kind fascinates us. You act from the heart, not the law. The room fell silent. After a long pause, Solon sighed. Fine, but the situation is delicate. Mira Evans, you are officially under Velrax protection for the remainder of your training. You will also be monitored by the human embassy for your safety. Monitored? She asked. Standard procedure, Ambassador Kieran said gently. Consider it. Diplomacy. Thalvarn nodded once. Our word stands. No harm shall touch her while Velrax blood flows in this academy. As Mira left the office, she felt the weight of their gazes on her back, human and alien alike. Walking through the halls again, she noticed the difference. Where once there had been laughter and gossip, now there was silence and space. People moved aside as she passed. Some bowed slightly. Others avoided eye contact altogether. She wasn't just Mira anymore. She was the human who fed the cub. The girl who made the predators kneel. That evening, as she returned to her dorm, she found something strange outside her door. A small box wrapped in dark fabric. She opened it carefully. Inside was a metal charm shaped like a claw, the Velrax symbol of protection and brotherhood. A note lay beneath it, written in careful galactic script. The pack remembers. You are not alone. RV Mira held the charm in her hand, feeling its weight. For the first time since the incident, she smiled. Not because she felt powerful, but because she felt seen. She had never meant to change anything. But sometimes, even the smallest act, a shared meal, a kind word, a moment of courage, could ripple outward like a star exploding into light. And somewhere, deep within the academy's walls, predators who once saw humans as prey now guarded one with their lives. The galaxy would never be the same again. The following week at the Galactic Academy felt different. Rumors still floated like dust in the air, but they no longer sounded cruel. They sounded curious. The story of the human who fed the predator cub had spread far beyond the campus. News networks across the systems played clips of Mira Evans walking through the halls surrounded by armored Velrax guards. Some called her a symbol of unity, others a dangerous disruption. Mira didn't care about any of that. She just wanted things to go back to normal. But deep down, she knew that would never happen. One afternoon after training drills, she sat alone by the observation window. The stars looked calm, endless, and the same as always. Yet her world had changed completely. She pulled the small Velrax charm from her pocket. The metal claw shimmered in the light. "What am I supposed to do with you?" she whispered. A soft, deep voice answered from behind her. "Keep it close." "It carries meaning," she turned. Commander Thalvarn stood there, tall, powerful, his silver armor reflecting the stars outside. "Meaning?" Mira asked, curious. The commander stepped closer, his movements precise and respectful. "The claw symbol," he said, "is only given to those who save a Velrax life. It means the bond of blood." Mira blinked. "I didn't save anyone. I just gave food to a cub." Thalvarn's golden eyes softened. "To us, that is saving a life. The cub was separated from its mother. He was hungry, frightened, and alone. Without your food, he would not have survived the day." Mira's chest tightened. "I didn't know. You weren't supposed to. Compassion without knowledge is the purest form of strength," he said. Then his tone darkened slightly. "But there is more you must understand." He gestured for her to follow. They walked through a quiet corridor, down toward the lower decks where only instructors and high-ranking officers were allowed. The lights dimmed, replaced by a soft violet glow. When they entered the chamber, Mira gasped. Inside were hundreds of glowing carvings on the walls, symbols, names, and shapes that looked like claw marks frozen in light. "This," Thalvarn said, "is the Hall of the Pact. Every name here belongs to one who has earned Velrax honor." He turned to her. "Now your name will join them." Mira stepped closer to the wall, tracing one glowing mark with her fingers. The warmth pulsed beneath her skin like a heartbeat. "But why me? I'm just a cadet." Thalvarn smiled slightly. "Because you reminded my people what honor truly means." He paused, then added, "The cub you fed, his name is Rilka, son of High General Varen. That child is heir to one of our great houses." Mira froze. "Wait, the general's son?" "Yes." "The moment you gave him food without fear or reward, the old traditions reawakened. You became his lifekeeper. In our laws, that means his pack owes you eternal protection." Mira stared at him. "That's a lot for a sandwich." Thalvarn laughed softly, a deep rumble echoing in the chamber. "Perhaps. But our people live by symbols. To us, every act carries weight. Even one piece of food can shift destinies." He placed a heavy clawed hand on her shoulder. "There will be those who envy this bond. Some who will test it, but you must not doubt its meaning." Later that evening, Mira returned to her dorm and found a message waiting on her datapad. It was encrypted, no sender. When she opened it, a hologram flickered to life. The image was blurry at first, then sharpened. A small Velrax cub appeared. Rilka. His fur was clean, his eyes bright. He held something in his tiny claws. A simple metal plate, half bent with a faint bite mark. "This is yours," his young voice said. "You gave me food when I was hungry, so I give you this, my first plate. I keep your scent in my memory. My pack watches you now. You are safe." The hologram ended. Mira sat still for a long time, smiling softly. The cub's innocence hit her harder than any award or speech ever could. But then her smile faded. If the cub was the general's son, that meant powerful people now had their eyes on her, and not all of them would see her kindness as a blessing. The next day, during combat simulation class, things started to change. While Mira practiced with drone targets, two alien cadets from another species, tall, scaled Tesserians, watched her closely. One of them whispered, "That's the human they're all talking about. Think she's protected by predators." When Mira turned, they smiled coldly. Let's see how strong her protection really is. Moments later, during the sparring session, they intentionally accidentally struck her from behind. She hit the floor hard, her weapon skidding away. Before she could react, a low, guttural growl filled the room. Everyone froze. From the viewing platform above, 3 Velrax soldiers dropped down, landing between Mira and the attackers. Their armor hissed as it sealed into combat mode. "Step away," Renvac ordered, voice metallic and sharp. The Tesserians backed up instantly, hands raised. "It was training, just training." Renvac's claws extended. "Training does not include striking from behind." "Enough," Mira said quickly, stepping forward. "I'm fine." Renvac hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Understood, Cadet Evans, but remember, your safety is not negotiable." He turned to the crowd. "If any harm comes to her, Velrax honor will answer." The message was clear. No one moved. No one dared to. When the soldiers finally left, Mira sighed. She could feel every eye on her again, this time, not with curiosity but with awe and fear. That night, Mira sat by her window again, watching the stars. She whispered to herself, "I didn't mean to start a war, just to share my lunch." Somewhere deep inside, though, she knew the truth. This wasn't about food anymore. It was about what it meant to be human, to act with kindness even when the universe had taught everyone else to be afraid. And now, her smallest act had become something far larger, a spark that might change how entire species saw one another. The Velrax called her Lifekeeper. But in the quiet of her room, Mira began to understand what that really meant. She hadn't just saved a cub. She had awakened a bond between predators and humans, one that could reshape the galaxy forever. The Galactic Academy had never been this silent, not during exams, not even during war drills. Something had happened, something that shook the core of every student and officer on campus. Early that morning, the Academy's main alarm had blared through every hallway. Red lights pulsed. The voice of Dean Sullenvar echoed through the intercom. "All cadets report to secure zones immediately." This is not a drill. Mira Evans stood frozen in her dorm room, heart pounding. Her datapad flashed with messages, warnings, alerts, and one encrypted code from Ren Vac, her Velrax guard. "Stay inside. Lock the door. Do not respond to anyone but us." But Mira had never been good at waiting. She peeked out the window and saw chaos. Smoke drifted from the West training wing. Dozens of armed security bots zipped through the air. Across the courtyard, a group of alien cadets ran for cover as alarms screamed. Then she saw them. 3 Tesserians, the same ones from the training room. But now they weren't just students. They were carrying weapons. Her blood ran cold. The door hissed open behind her. "Mira!" It was Ren Vac, armor-scorched, visor cracked. He looked furious and worried at once. "Come," he ordered. "They've breached the lower levels. Someone is after the cub." "The cub?" Mira gasped. "Rilka. But he's off-world?" Ren shook his head. "He was brought here secretly for the peace ceremony. The attack isn't random. They want to use him to start a war between our people." Mira felt her pulse racing. "Then we have to go," Ren growled softly. "You don't understand. This is not your fight." "Yes, it is," she said firmly. "Because it started with me." He stared at her for a long second, then nodded. "Then stay behind me. No heroics." They moved fast through the dim corridors. Sirens wailed, lights flickered. The sound of metal boots echoed through the halls. When they reached the lower deck, they found the main blast doors blown apart, molten edges still glowing. Smoke filled the air. From inside came the faint sound of a cub crying. Ren's voice dropped to a whisper. "They're in the reactor hall." Mira followed him, careful and quiet. The air was thick with heat and the smell of burning circuitry. They found 3 attackers near the center of the room. The Tesserian cadets, holding weapons and standing over a small Velrax cub wrapped in a silver blanket. "Don't move," Ren roared. The Tesserians turned, hissing. One of them sneered. "Step aside, Predator. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns honor," Ren growled. They laughed. "Honor? You call this weakling compassion honor? You think giving a human power will save you?" Ren took a step forward. "You have no idea what you're playing with." Mira could see the cub trembling behind them, his fur matted, eyes wide with fear. Without thinking, she moved. "Mira!" Ren hissed, but she ignored him. She stepped into the open, hands raised. "Stop! You don't need to hurt him." The Tesserian leader pointed his blaster at her. "Ah, the famous human. The Lifekeeper herself. Maybe we should test how much protection you really have." Mira swallowed hard. "You're scared," she said softly. The leader blinked. "What?" "You're scared," she repeated. "Because you don't understand why the Velrax chose to protect a human. You think compassion makes you weak. But you're wrong." The leader's claws tightened on his weapon. "Quiet." Ren moved like lightning. His armor flared as he tackled the first attacker. Energy bolts flew across the hall. Sparks exploded. Mira ducked and ran toward the cub. "Rilka," she shouted. "It's okay. I've got you." The cub whimpered and reached out his tiny claws. She grabbed him and pulled him close just as another shot hit the floor beside her. Ren roared, swinging his blade and disarming the last Tesserian. The blast from his strike echoed like thunder. The attackers fell, defeated and groaning. Silence filled the hall again, heavy and electric. Mira held the cub tightly, her heart pounding. Ren stood over the fallen enemy's chest, heaving. When it was finally over, he turned toward her and the cub. "You did not stay behind," Mira smiled weakly. "I know," he sighed, shaking his head. "Humans, you never listen. But we care," she said quietly. "That's our strength." Ren looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "And that is why we follow." Hours later, the academy returned to calm. The attackers were arrested, the cub was safe. and the Galactic Council issued an emergency broadcast praising Mira's bravery. But the real moment came during the ceremony held the next day. The Hall of the Pact was filled with hundreds of cadets, officers and ambassadors from across the galaxy. Mira stood at the front, dressed in her simple human uniform beside Thalvarn and Rilke. Thalvarn raised his voice so all could hear. On this day the Velrax honor Cadet Mira Evans, who showed courage not in battle but in kindness. She reminded us that strength is not in fear but in compassion. He turned to her and bowed, a gesture no Velrax had ever made to a human before. The crowd gasped. Even the Dean looked stunned. Mira Evans, Thalvarn said, you are now and forever a sister of the Velrax Pack. Your name will be remembered in our walls, in our history, and in our blood. Rilke stepped forward and placed a new charm in her hand, this one shaped like a small silver star entwined with a claw. It means, the cub said softly, that we protect each other. Mira knelt down, smiling at him. Always. The hall erupted in applause, a sound that echoed through the academy and across 100 worlds. That night, as Mira stood by the window again, she looked out at the endless stars. She touched the charm around her neck, feeling its weight. Her simple act, one moment of kindness, and had changed everything. She didn't feel like a hero. She still felt like the same human who shared her lunch with a hungry child. But now she understood something deeper. Kindness was power, compassion was armor, and sometimes, even in a galaxy full of predators, the smallest act of humanity could tame the fiercest hearts. She whispered softly to the stars, guess we're not so different after all. Far away, in the Velrax homeworld, a cub looked up at the same stars and whispered the same words.